Today I'm super excited to be having Dado, the founding partner of Juvalian Consulting in our headquarters in Dubai. Dado, thank you so much for being here. And today we want to discuss a subject, a hot topic, which is about corporate venturing. So what is corporate venturing really? How does it fit in the innovation and digital transformation strategy of companies? We will discuss about just that. So, Dado, we are seeing the world that is changing super fast across industries, and the Middle East really is not an exception. All industries here are going through a transformation, and we see a new trend actually that is coming, which is corporate venturing.
Sure. It's amazing to see how fast corporate venturing is actually picking up. We've been helping companies for the past 5 years with their transformation efforts. What we've seen is that a lot of companies don't have the speed internally that it takes to really transform in a fast way. So we are a huge believer in collaborations with the outside world and partnerships. And so working together with startups and scale-ups really has become a way for companies to transform themselves, to go faster in innovation, and to really acquire new skills and culture, because that's really the added value of corporate venturing.
Absolutely, and we are seeing, I always love when we talk about this metaphor of and comparing the company to this big boat that is really difficult to steer in a direction, and the importance of having this agile fleet, small teams or startup for that matter, who can really be the agent of disruption of the mothership itself.
Correct.
So really here we are seeing how important for a corporate to leverage the strength of a startup.
Yeah, true, and there's value in boats. So having a big boat, as you say, it's very stable. It creates a lot of value. The downside is it's not easy to turn around. And that's of course the advantage of a smaller speedboat, that it can go faster, it can turn from direction. It has a more agile team in most cases. And what we see is that both can benefit from each other. So there's value in the big mothership, there's value in the speedboats. And what we think is that speedboats can benefit from the large stability of a bigger boat, and also from the network of a bigger boat. And then on the other hand, that the motherships, the big corporate organizations, can benefit from these younger teams that are typically in speedboats and can move faster. The only thing which I think is very important is that it's not just about financial investments, because that's often how corporate venturing is positioned these days. It's much more. It's really about setting up a collaboration and benefiting from the mindset and the skills of each other, more than just investing in a company and then hoping that it will turn out in something good.
Absolutely, and as you said, it's on both ways. In the Middle East, we are seeing genius around, and the startup ecosystem is getting stronger and stronger. And the more we are interacting with the startups, the more I see this trend of startup as looking quickly for funding and for cash. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that it's not about our region having a shortage in cash, but what a startup needs is this market access. Mm-hmm. The opportunity to have a kind of sandbox where they can validate their idea,
sure.
Tap into the network of big companies who can benefit at a certain point from this new disruptive idea or technology, etc. And from the other side, as you said, companies can only benefit from this disruptor.
And that's the good thing. So either you wait for disruption to happen, or you try to disrupt yourself. So it's the ideal way to form that fleet of agile speedboats around you that might have the potential to become another mothership in the future. But at least you have them close to yourself. And as you were saying, in terms of investments, it's not money for money. Yeah. I think that's the important dynamic. It's not about investing money and then hoping that money will return. It's really about investing in the relationship and hoping that that relationship will turn you into something stronger than when you were alone. So for the mothership, it means really a cultural flywheel. I really believe that working with startups can learn you a lot in new ways of working, new style leadership, new ways of setting up projects and so forth. I think from the other perspective, for the startup, it's not just about getting the cash from the big corporation. It's also using the network, as you say, using the access to their scale, using the data and the insights that they have more in the market than you probably have. So there's so much more than the money part in the equation. I think that's super important. By the way, what you see, it's not just traditional companies that are setting up corporate venturing. The big tech firms today are big corporate venture players. So if you look at Amazon, for example, the list of collaborations and investments is huge. So we look at them as one massive success, but actually they try a lot and sometimes they fail, but they have a lot of bets going on, as you say. And then you see one of the recent upcoming players that was a huge company before, Microsoft, is really investing a lot in partnerships. Actually, Satya Nadella, the new CEO of Microsoft, wrote a book on how he reinvented Microsoft, let's say. And one of the 3 core elements of his current success is partnerships. So he says, before we were not in the Apple ecosystem, now we opened up all our apps to the public, also in the Apple ecosystem. But apart from that, he's also collaborating a lot with startups and scale-ups. So as you know, they bought LinkedIn. They just acquired GitHub, which is the software community. So Microsoft, Amazon, and also Alibaba and the other tech giants are really big corporate venture players. And I think more traditional companies could really look at them as a kind of example on how they create an ecosystem. And for me, that's really the power of corporate venturing. It's you create an ecosystem where the fleet of speedboats is going in the same kind of direction of the mothership, so your North Star, where you're heading for together. And it's really in the power of that ecosystem that you become, let's say, incontournable, because a company from the outside can let's say, disrupt you in one node of the ecosystem, but they cannot play out the whole ecosystem. So that's really, for me, the value.
Absolutely, and we are seeing even in the region the startup at the time who managed to scale super fast are now becoming a player in the corporate venturing scene. We're thinking of Noon and Kareem, who are really growing by continuous acquisition. Now, there is something as well important for us and for our audience to think about, is that corporate venturing and collaborating with startups, it's not only about setting up a corporate venturing fund. It's not just, as you say, the money, or it's really about creating different forms of collaboration. Mm-hmm. And it can be through just organizing, startup Sundays in the region, and or doing some pitch competition, hackathons, going into innovation safari, which really gives the company and the leadership an idea of what is going on around, and then probably doing some either investment or equity investment or acquisition, etc. If the collaboration and investment makes sense. So it's not only about investing.
Correct. In our book, we talk about 3 phases, which are connected to what you just lined out. So it's the chatting phase, where you actually try to talk with as many startups and scale-ups as you can. So you can indeed organize startup Sundays where you meet as many startups as possible, and you expose them to your leadership team, exactly. Which is super valuable. So even if you don't have a collaboration, but you know them and you talk with these people, it's enormously valuable. The second phase is what we call the dating phase, where you actually set up real projects with these startups and scale-ups, and you just buy their product or their service. I think that from a mindset perspective is already very interesting. Both for the corporate and the startup, because a startup is lacking cash flow, so for them it's good to have some recurring income. And for the corporate organization, they can see how a startup really works in practice. So they can see the startup pitch, but if you work with them, you have a better understanding. And then if you go through that dating phase, you can come to a marry phase where you actually, as you say, invest or acquire the startup. But it's really important that you go through the whole funnel. And what most companies do is they skip the first 2 phases and they immediately invest or acquire. So what we advise is to go through the 3 steps, so chat, date, marry, and the conversion should be quite low. So you should be very, very critical It's about quality, not quantity. So what we advise is a conversion of 2%. So meaning if you see 100, you should invest or acquire 2. So really be critical. But there is a lot of value also in the chat and the dates. So the end game is not always the investment. The end game can just be to buy the product and to go faster with a kind of service that you don't develop yourself.
Yeah, and in the region, for example, we are seeing Majid Al Futtaim through Carrefour really going in this direction. Now they are putting on their shelves products from small startup here. You know, at the time 6 years ago, this would have been completely impossible. Souk.com are giving a platform for small SMEs, startups to sell their products through this platform. I really think that the region is going into this direction, and the new investor, the new black, will be corporate investor, definitely. Obviously, if we go into the investment phase, but we are seeing really this kind of collaboration starting up. When we look at accelerators as well in the region, we are seeing a kind of coalition of different companies who are investing their time and programs and mentorship to set up some accelerator. Again, to tap on the great mind of our entrepreneurs in the region, bet on the future probably, but there is this collaboration. For example, in Tilak, which is an accelerator in the aviation industry, who are managing to gather the efforts of General Electric and Emirates, etc., and the Catalyst, for example, in Abu Dhabi, or Fiklar Labs. There is really something that is going on here in the region.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It's amazing to see that.
Yeah, and honestly, I have to say, everybody talks about the US and Asia when it comes to digital, but I'm a huge fan of what is happening here in the Middle East, and I see the Middle East really as a third superpower when it comes to digital. Also, the Shaloub Group just opened their greenhouse, which is an accelerator for startups in the retail world, which makes a lot of sense because the Shaloub Group has 750 stores with a lot of shelf space, so they can really bring a lot of value to these startups who quickly want to test their product and their service, but they don't have the access to the stores or to the right environments to actually see what the reaction of the audience will be. So making that match is so valuable for both parties. So Shaloub can discover new interesting platforms, technologies and so forth, and the startups can use the scale of that group. So I'm really inspired by what is happening here in the region. And the good thing here, everything goes fast, right? So once the mindset is turned and people believe in it, it's just hitting the button and moving forward. So that's fantastic.
Absolutely. I think the region has all what it takes to become a new innovation hub, but it will definitely not be a copy-paste of what is happening later. The Middle East has its own culture, its own need as well, its own problem to tackle, and leveraging all of that will definitely make, with the conversion of the academia, the corporate, what they are doing, the startup, bring something that is completely innovative and proper to the region. And now when we see that corporates are engaging in this kind of corporate venturing, obviously it takes a lot from a corporation, right? When we think of all the vendor management processes and the selection criteria to, for example, bring in a new provider into the table, this is too much, for example, for us startup. As great as their product or service is, sometimes there is this clash where for startups things need to go quickly, and for corporate they have, huge selection criteria that can really kill, this opportunity for a startup to access the market, and for the corporate to tap into this genius.
Yeah, true. Yeah, you're super right. And what I think is necessary is there needs to be kind of a rules of engagement document or principle within companies that if they want to collaborate with startups, it's not just the mindset, you also need the practicality behind. Which means having the right team who can deal with these people, but also in terms of procurement, for example. If you think about procurement, a lot of startups won't get through the normal criteria. So you need a kind of startup engagement kit. That's how we call it. So if you embark on your corporate venturing program, make sure that you set the right rules, and that you make that all the different teams who are involved in the process have a kind of different approach in working with startups and scale-ups than with traditional companies, because otherwise it will never work and you will get this clash of cultures.
So when we are in the situation, we are a big corporate, we understand how important it is to collaborate and foster this kind of outside innovation in a way with the startups. it's important as well to identify which are the kind of problem that we want to tackle, what kind of startup we need to look into. So there must be really, a strategy, a thinking behind. It's not only about going in all direction and picking up a startup that is bringing an innovative technology. There are some kind of rules of identification, of selection, even from a corporate, to make their efforts relevant.
Sure. It's a very, very good point, and I think it's important because a lot of corporations try to look for technologies.
Exactly.
So everybody right now is talking about AI, blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, and so forth, which are all great technologies. But the real thing you need to hunt for is what is the problem you're trying to solve.
Exactly.
What I would advise if you start with corporate venturing is first, make sure you have your transformation strategy. What is the North Star that you're heading for as a company? And then within that North Star, what are the kind of problems you want to solve for customers? And if you find these, then you can try to look for startups or scale-ups who can help you to solve these problems. But don't just start from the technology side. So if they solve the problem with AI, it's fine. Or with blockchain, it's fine.
Exactly.
But it's not about the technology.
Yeah.
It's really about a great problem. And if you can find that, then you have something really that can bring value to customers. And for me, the definition of a great problem is a problem with a high frequency and a deep pain. And there are two problems that you should avoid. One is the what we call shark bite problem. So very deep pain, but the frequency is not high enough to create a sustainable market. And then you have the reverse, which we call the mosquito bite. The mosquito bite has a very high frequency, but the pain is not deep enough to make people pay for the product. So really avoid the shark bite problems and the mosquito bite problems, and try to look for problems that have both. So deep pain, high frequency, and if you can find a player in the market that can really help you to solve that equation, then you're up for something great.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole thing is that this kind of corporate venturing strategy needs to be linked, as we say, to the transformation strategy of the company. And when we talk about transformation or thinking of new or adjacent markets where the company can thrive, or new product and services, and the customer that they need to retain, serve, or acquire, sometimes they are future customer, there is this whole strategy that needs to be in place. And this is where corporate venturing strategy and collaboration with outside player startup can make the difference. And definitely technology is just an enabler.
Yeah, of course, true.
It's, doesn't matter, as you said, if I'm able to tackle this market using machine learning or quantum computing, if I am having a players or an idea that I can test, validate, and scale, that really answer the problem. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, indeed. And you said something else which I think is very important. It's the combination of outside in innovation, which is collaborations with startups, and inside out. Yeah. And I think what companies might not forget is corporate venturing is not just the holy grail. You need to do it in combination. So you have to upgrade your mothership and really build things from the internal side and make sure that it becomes more efficient, more future-proof. And at the same time, you build your fleet. And the mistake we see a lot of companies making is that they just upgrade the mothership, or they only build the fleet of speedboats. And it's really in the combination of both that you become future-proof. And you need to make sure that they have that shared North Star vision, so that once you have great problems and you meet the right players, that they're all heading for that same direction. And that's really a prerequisite to be successful.
Exactly, and there is another sometimes disconnect that we are seeing, is that some effort that are done in terms of corporate venturing are completely disconnected with the mothership. Let's say a company is engaging with the startups and they are building amazing ideas, and once this team that is in charge of this corporate venturing activity come back to the mothership and to the board, here we can see a lot of friction. So the integration of these ideas or project needs as well to be smooth. Otherwise, we will be having different speeds that are not going in the right direction, and they not embedded in terms of the transformation strategy of the mothership. So there is this as well link and the way of collaboration between the teams that are in the mothership, that are warrant of the transformation strategy of the company.
Correct.
and the team that is, in charge of scouting the market, working on the procurement processes, giving, to the startup a platform for them to test the idea and scale. So there is as well this link that needs to not be overlooked, right?
Yeah, it's another very important point, and a lot of companies try to integrate the companies with each other, which I think you should avoid, because you work with speedboats or startups just because they can move faster. So don't try to mingle them in the mothership. But what you need to do is integration of knowledge and integration of culture and so forth. So it's super important that you make the connection, and therefore one of the major roles is what we call the fleet manager, which is a person or a team that really connects the mothership with the different speedboats, and also make sure that the teams know each other and that they can benefit from each other. And that's a mistake that often happens. Like, once a collaboration is set up, the deal is closed, but that's when the magic actually starts to happen. So we believe in opening the relationship and not just closing the deal, and that's super important. So you need a fleet manager, you need people who really walk around and make sure that the knowledge is transferred and that both parties can optimally benefit from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really in a way very important for even startups who are coming into this new universe, full of processes as well. Not everything obviously sucks in corporate. I'm not saying that, but I guess they need in a way a kind of guiding hand to bring them to solve real problems, and in the same time, the mothership and the company need to be really exposed and have access and interact really. It's not only in token, or as you say, the acquisition or investment, or saying we are giving them a project. It's really interacting. There are so much things to gain from this kind of interaction.
True.
From a culture, super important in culture. We see a lot of our clients, when we engage with them in the digital transformation, which is a transformation in a digital world, they are really super serious about taking their company forward and tackling the market, and answering to the disruption and being future proof. It's really, there is this willingness once they know where they are heading to embed and execute. But a lot of things and a lot of projects get killed by the culture. That is not a culture that will foster innovation or new ideas, etc. Whereas in the opposite, the competitive edge of a startup is the amazing culture.
Yeah. You're right, and for the past 5 years, where we helped companies in transforming, we helped them a lot with the brain, which is the strategy. What we see is you also need new skills, and we call that the body. But maybe the most important in the whole equation is what we call the heart. So you need the brain, the body, and the heart. And the heart is really the mindset and the underlying DNA in the organization, which is of crucial importance to really dive into corporate venturing the right way. From a practical standpoint, it means you need a spokesperson who can really make the connection, as we said. But you also need to evaluate the relationship on a very fast pulse. So often companies wait too long to see if the startup is happy with the collaboration, and the other way around as well. Is the company happy with the collaboration of the startup? So what we described in our book is the Accelerator Index, which is a kind of variant on the NPS score, where you ask a simple question every 3 months on a score from 0 to 10. How happy are you with this collaboration? And then you have 4 phases. So the most bad situation is the anchor, where really the player or the collaboration is dragging you down. Up to a turbo propeller, where you really feel that by having this collaboration you're accelerating a lot. And I think it's super important to keep that finger on the pulse all the time, and not wait for a year to evaluate whether you're happy with the collaboration. So it's also talking a lot. Basically there are a lot of similarities between having a real relationship with a human being and having a relationship with companies amongst each other. So it all comes down to the same dynamics: transparency, talking a lot, setting the right expectations, and so forth. So but most companies again try to just close the deal. What is also important is that a lot of these deals are being made by the financial people in the company or the CEO of the organization, which is very normal because of course it's a strategic investment or strategic collaboration. So it's typical that there are kind of people who are in charge of the strategy of the organization or the financial part are leading this. But again, the real magic happens when the collaboration is really working inside the business. So what is also crucial is that once the collaboration is set up, that the business can adopt the service or the product and really gets to know the people in the speedboat, the startup or the scale-up. So adopting a startup as a kind of reflex is super interesting, and I get this idea from Dina Sidani, who is leading the collaboration efforts with startups at Chaloup Group. And she set up a program called Adopt a Startup, where business units can really adopt a startup to really engage with them and really have that collaboration. Which again I think is crucial. If it only sticks with the CFO or the CEO of the company or just the leadership team, you don't really get the collaboration. You just get the return from the financial side, but not from the business side. So bringing it inside the business is really interesting.
Absolutely, and there was this example as well of Ricolab, which was super important, where the person was in charge of driving this kind of outside in collaboration, was talking about the challenges, but as well in terms of the responsibility that she had to bring both. That was an amazing example, I guess, of the right way. Basically, there is no right or wrong. There are only ways that can work for this company and not for the other. But the example of Ricolab in Belgium was super interesting.
Yeah, it's a super interesting. So Ricolab is the radical innovation hub of Ricola. Ricola is one of the most famous Swiss bonbon makers. So they make herbs, and based on the herbs, they make sweets. And they really try to reinvent themselves constantly. So they created a kind of outside garage where people can really innovate. And there's a team of 5 people in charge of that Ricolab, which is on a separate location than the actual headquarters, which is interesting because they really try to separate it to make sure they have a different environment, different atmosphere, are not entangled in the typical hierarchy and processes of the group. And what they do is they don't just collaborate with startups, but also with universities. And also with biohackers, which are interesting for them. So people who really try to make things based on herbs and really do different things in the healthcare environment. So they bring people from different perspectives, and then they try to come up with new ideas. And I think that's super interesting because corporate venturing, again, is not just startups, not just scale-ups, but really the idea of working with the outside world. So it can be universities, it can be schools, it can be people with a different mindset than people within your organization. So Ricolab is a great example. They have a website, by the way, that you can visit. So if you just type in Ricolab on Google, you will find it, and it's a good inspiration.
Absolutely, and you know, this made me think. For example, in the UAE, it's amazing the number of things that are happening to drive this kind of innovation ecosystem. As you said, for companies, it's not only about collaboration with startups, but there is as well this academia, universities. Policymakers, the government, etc. And we see a lot of these players in the market that are fostering this kind of collaboration. For example, in Abu Dhabi Global Market, it's great to see that the authority has set up this kind of sandbox where startup can come in the fintech industry, can come and try and test their market. And it's an amazing platform for companies to come and tap into this genius. So I agree with you. There is this conversion of collaboration with the outside world at the end, and really for the company to not only look inside but open itself to the world. The world is changing so fast, and we really need to look around and see what we can leverage to, at the end, create more prosperity and wealth for all. You know, I love our North Star vision as Dual Union Consulting when we say that we are here to save the big whales. It is true, you know, our mission is really to be a force of good and help these big companies who are being challenged challenge, and co-create with them their future. I really think that just bringing this corporate venturing strategy can help tremendously all companies in the Middle East, specifically. A lot of things are happening, and
yeah, for sure. And as you say, it's very logical that there's more knowledge outside your company than inside, always, because there are 6 billion people on the planet, so you always have limited skills and limited knowledge within your organization. Yeah. So the more you open up, the more you can speed up. And what you could say is that corporate venturing is the new R&D, where before companies try to reinvent or invent everything from the inside, and corporate venturing is really bringing in the outside as a force of good to change the inside. And as you say, all the stakeholders in that dynamic will become better. Yeah. So for universities, it's interesting because they can, let's say, engage their students to help organizations in real cases. By doing so, students will see better results, and companies will see better results as well. So we're all in this together, and it's creating the lively ecosystem that is needed to become future-proof.
Dado, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our interaction, and
Me too.
Thank you. And I really hope that our audience enjoy it as well. I think we'll be ending here today, but please, if you have any question related to that, please don't hesitate to send it to us. We'll be more than happy to answer this.
Sure.
Can we do another video for this? And all the best, and really don't forget that the only thing that is more exciting than today is tomorrow. We'll see you soon.